Hello and welcome back to this session on Treasury talent in a world of accelerated transformation. I'd just like to remind you that the Q&A button is at the top of your screen if you're coming in through the internet, and if you're on the app, it's bottom left. So do put your questions in through the session and we'll be able to address them towards the end of it. The session is being recorded, so if for any reason you might get thrown out or you have to go and do something else, don't forget you can come back and listen to it and all the other sessions up till the 13th of August. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my panelists, and I'd like to start with Jayesh, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining from. My name is Jayesh. I'm part of the ACT's Future Leaders in Treasury Committee. I'm also part of the Policy and Technical Advisory Panel, PTAP. Apart from helping the ACT with a number of things, I also worked for SEGRO PLC as the Assistant Treasurer. Prior to SEGRO, I was a dealer at GlaxoSmithKline, and then prior to that, I had my graduate program with General Electric.
Thank you very much, Jayesh. And just to point out to our viewers, if you'd like to join the Future Leaders group, it's a group that shall we say, young at heart. We tend to say 35s and under, but there are no hard and fast rules. If I can move on to Mike now, please.
Hello, everyone. As Jayesh said, from around the world. My name is Mike Richards. I run the Treasury Recruitment Company. We place a lot of the people that you see before you and you've seen over the past few days into Treasury roles. We've been going over 20 years, placing from Treasury Assistant to Global Treasurer. So I hope we've got a good view this afternoon about Treasury transformation and some of the talent issues that are facing people in the current COVID times. In addition to that, I run a weekly podcast where I interview treasurers about their Treasury careers, about how they've developed and grown. So look out for that, and looking forward to talking talent issues this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Mike. And you mentioned around the world, we have people from 95 countries, and there's over 2,500 of them. So a great community coming together, as you say, internationally. Tram, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, first, thank you so much, Caroline and ACT team, for having me. It's a great pleasure. So I'm Nguyen, and I'm the co-founder of CFTE. We are one of the largest educational platforms in fintech and in digital finance. I'm not a technologist, so I won't tell you about everybody should learn about Python in a bank. My background is traditional finance. I started my career as a trader in capital market, in FX, so the world of treasury I know quite well, and I was trading non-deliverable forwards in New York, and then I moved to London. It was a couple of years ago, working for the emerging market sales desk, and then moved to UBS in private banking to work with ultra high net worth clients. And a few years ago, I left banking and set up my own, so an entrepreneur. Some of you probably know my other co-founder, Nguyen, who is very active in the fintech industry, and he was also himself an MD at Citi and a fintech resident at Oxford. And it was listening to him at Oxford that I really realized, it was a couple of years ago, it was 4 years ago, that and by talking also to the chief executive of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the regulator in Singapore, that I realized that there was a whole new world of finance that I didn't know. And despite having spent more than 16 years in banking, I knew nothing at that time about Challenger Bank, APIs. I had never heard about IT and financial. And so that's why we launched a CFTE. And the mission of CFTE is very much to make sure that millions of professionals in finance like me are not left behind, and that finance is becoming much more digital. It requires skills. And so now we have thousands of participants around the world, and we're very, very happy to be also partner with ACT.
Thanks very much, Tram. And on that note, this festival is all about transformation. And we've seen an incredible acceleration in transformation, an incredible amount of change throughout this COVID-19 period, whether it be technology and people working from home when they thought they never could before, or people's behaviors, societal factors, and when we combine with things like the Black Lives Matter movement and other areas of ESG, it's hugely transforming. But even before COVID-19, we were thinking about the younger treasurers coming into the profession, and we were hearing that people are thinking much more about the how than the what. how they're going to work, not necessarily sticking with one profession through their whole lives, etc. And we're hearing from neuroscientists that brains are developing in different ways because of the way people interact and use technology at the moment. So my question to the panel is really, how do you see transformation in Treasury and finance? And what can we expect from the new Treasury, kind of arising from the ashes of COVID-19 like a phoenix, new and fresh, so to speak? So I'd like to invite Jayesh, first of all, to give his thoughts, please.
I think it's when we're talking about the young treasurers, we're really talking about those who are under the age of 35, the so-called millennial Generation Z or Z age group. This, as you rightly said, the movement, the structural change was well ahead in a way ahead of time. The motion was already in play before COVID. But it's important to take a step back and observe on what this generation has really been brought up with. So from a very young age, they've had smartphones and tablets, okay? They've never seen a day without internet. Social media is all around them. Entrepreneurs, CEOs, CFOs, influencers are mere tweet, Snapchat, Instagram post away. The amount of information is far greater than what previous generations have ever had. They can see what's happening in each and every part of the globe, right from New Zealand to the west coast of the US. So their perspective is very different. Their view on the world is quite different. And that's very important to really appreciate and embrace. Social equality, fairness, diversity, sustainability are very important. As a result, who they work for, what they do, where they work, they want to ensure that that does not contradict their social values. So therefore, you can see that the next generation of treasurers will be quite different to what's currently out there. But I think three things will need to change. And I think three things you'll see adapting and evolving. There needs to be a greater emphasis on remote working. And I'm not just talking about where you work, but also how you work and when you work. Studies have shown that people perform better in different parts of the day. There are nocturnals. People prefer working late at night, and there are people that really enjoy working early in the morning. So we need to ensure that our organizations are ready for this. Now, I completely appreciate there are parts of Treasury that are time sensitive, but there are significant other parts that can be flexible. The other thing is education. Education is extremely important. The Treasury team is quite a unique team. The challenges that we deal with are quite unique, so we need to ensure that the on-the-job training is there, and technical studies and sponsorship is there as well. The important part about education, though, is adapting to a person's learning needs. There's things like kinesthetic learning, which are practical, and give them a practical way of learning, and not just give them a textbook and say, go do a sum. Lastly, and I think for me, probably the most important, is mentorship. We need to ensure that senior leaders devote time to this group. Senior leaders have seen crises. They've seen experience which young people just do not have. And to be a successful person, you need to appreciate on what's happened in the past, and for you to have that ability to work in the future. And after all, one of these people will be in your seat in not too distant future. So do appreciate that.
Absolutely. A great roundup there, Jayesh. And I would encourage people to also look at our mentoring scheme. You can be matched up with a mentor. We're always looking for new mentees and new mentors, and it's a great way to learn from other people's experience. So do please look at that. And just reflecting on one of the points you made, Jayesh, you talked about values. In fact, one of my podcasts, the Strategic Insight podcast that come out every Friday on our website, one of them is focused solely on values. And all the research shows if you're working to your values, you're going to be far more successful than otherwise. And so it just shows the younger generation has got it right without any prompting from us oldies. So great to hear that from you, Jayesh. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn now to Tram Ann, if you'd like to add your thoughts, please, Tram Ann.
No, thanks. I think I totally agree with Jayesh and yourself, Caroline is totally right. The fact that values are important, and a lot of people and perhaps the younger generation put a lot of focus with spending a lot of time at work, and now it's even more the case, because they work remotely at their own place. They really, really want to get a sense of value of what they do and why they're doing this, why they're spending so much time working, and that is very important. It's probably not our generation back then, but now it's very much the focus for the current generation. And I think we can all agree that the past few months it has forced us to think a lot about reskilling and upskilling, learning new ways of working, new skills that we will be needed in this new normal, and challenges ourselves to reimagine what is possible. Even as someone who considers myself as quite digital savvy, I had to adjust to leading teams remotely. It's not easy. It's not easy, or even though we were digital before, but now not having people in the room at the same time, you really need to actually put some new strategy and making sure that things you have the right communication, figure out how to maintain quality client service with remote and distributing team, and most importantly, inspiring team to adapt to new changes and learning new skills. So totally agree with Jayesh. And I think as a founder with a relatively small team, we face challenges, and I think I agree what leaders in charge of larger organization went and will go through in the next few months again. What I just want to share two things. As a founder of a company, what we ask, and I was very surprised because we have, teams around the world, and we faced, that COVID situation long back. So when we asked our team before the lockdown in the UK, we did ask, where do you want to go? Do you want to travel back to your country before the lockdown? And some of them, choose to go back to Malaysia, Hong Kong, France, etc. Now I don't have, my team is not in the UK anymore. It's everywhere around the world. I don't know where they are. But when I ask them, where do you want to be in the next 3 months? Where do you want to work with? Because we could stay remote, or we can have, a presence in the office. I was very surprised. More than 80% feel more comfortable working from home or just a couple of days in the office. Not a lot of people wanted to go back to the office. Only 10% prefer working in the office, which raises a lot of questions, such as how do you organize a team which most of people work remotely? How do you keep the social and communication benefits of being together in the same office? What's the purpose of the office if 80% prefer to work remotely? So we've had asked questions to ourselves, and so it's changed a lot. It changed a lot of what is the impact on the individual, the organization, and the society as a whole. And I think the world is changing. Behaviors of the people change as well. And just to mention, I was talking to a CEO of a bank in the UK, 80,000 employees, and he said only 20% of his team will be back to the office. All the rest will work remotely. So it does mean, as you said, Caroline, we're questioning that, what's going to be the impact in certain jobs, and prefer in Treasury, is that a lot of things will change. And my belief is that, when we ask the question, and for me it's real, and then I'll stop there, but I think it's very important to associate that. When I ask the question of CEOs in a bank, I say, what do you think can we transform organization without transforming people? Can we transform organization without transforming people? Of course, the answer is no, we need to transform people. And that is not about the why we should, because now COVID is saying it already. We don't have to be convinced about that. It's the how. And the how is very complex. It's very complex. And I challenge, the people who say that it's easy. It's not easy at all. And it has to, I think, we need to discuss about the how than the why. I can talk a lot more, but I question and I open the discussion with this.
Thanks very much, Tram. We'll move over to Mike then now. From a recruiter's perspective, what are your thoughts?
I think actually to reflect a little bit on what Jayesh said and then come on to Tram and things, I think if we go pre-COVID and before this all happened, the world had already changed and already was changing, if you like. And that was the sort of balance between employers and employees' expectations, below 35, I'm post 35. I know you'd be surprised at Jayesh as well, in particular. But when I first started in the world of work, I was grateful for a job, and that, and they paid me, and I went, did my job, and I went home. I did this talk in Brussels at one of the conferences, and we were talking about my 16-year-old daughter, who just was asked a question, and she, at the time, she's a few years older, but she said, she was getting a job as a waitress, and she was saying, well, what else are they going to give me? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, what are the other benefits are they going to give me? I went, hang on, you're going to serve tables, they're going to give you money, and then you'll take your tips maybe. Yeah, but do I get pension? Do we get benefits? And I think that's the big difference, the actual flip round, if you like, of, employee, employer, and employee expectations. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's actually right, and there's a much better balance. I've written about it before in some of the blogs where, one of them was, I entitled it, "It's not about you anymore, it's about them." And when we particularly focus in on recruitment, for example, one of my clients in the US, they used to try and recruit, and they used to say, oh, well, we're going to give them a big case study to do, and they're going to do this. I went, why? They're not going to, and literally they were struggling. I said, have a coffee with them. Get these guys in the office to be interested in your job. The same with Treasury. I'm trying to do that with some of our Treasury clients now, and saying, you need to get these people interested in your job, even if they're applying for it. It's not that they apply, oh, right, well, let's interview them. Well, yeah, now you need to explain why they're going to have a career with you. Where are they going to go in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you going to do for them? And that's right, as it were. I think as we come into then, Tram's mentioning about COVID and everything else, I think it is a temporary bubble, if you like, if that's right. Clients, if you like, will be inundated with candidates. So they'll be like trying to make a move because it's sort of a log jam of the market, as it were. That's going to ease, come September, October. I've not seen that 80% of people want to work from home. I have seen a difference in working patterns. I've got some clients who are saying they are going to be completely flexible at working, but some of the, again, Jayesh mentioned about up to 35s. A lot of the guys when I'm talking to, they need to go and see their bosses. They want to, Treasury, if you like, is quite a social experience as well as anything else. It's not just numbers. And if you're a Treasury analyst and you're stuck on a problem, you're not going to look around the room and say, oh, and you're stuck on it. And, you're going to want to turn to your boss. And your boss at the moment isn't a brick wall. And you're going to be, hang on, I want some interaction, or I want some coaching. So I think there will be a balance. And I've heard much more about people talking about maybe Tuesday, Wednesday working in the office, maybe Thursdays, blending it with working from home on Mondays and Fridays, and doing it a different way of doing it. That's where I'm seeing a sort of a change. Is probably the best way to change in working.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I mean, there is a Gartner study on what people are saying about returning to work. There's so many different studies, aren't there? Yeah. And we are hearing from our, large group treasurers that one of their main concerns is the younger members of their team, as in the other newer members of their team missing out on that kind of being together. But we do have some tips in one of our other sessions, pre-recorded sessions, the virtual handshake, on how to deal in that kind of scenario. But Mike, you mentioned your blogs. Then where would our audience find your blogs if they're wanting?
Thank you very much. Anywhere on our website, treasuryrecruitment.com, and again, we'll come on to some of the other bits which relate to this. I've got so much from talking to treasurers every week. We've done 110 podcasts now, every week a different treasurer. And some of them talk about, topics like this, about the employee experience, but some of them talk much more about, the IT aspects, and some of them talk about different things. And what I have discovered, I've loved talking to treasurers for 20 years, but everything, Jayesh, for instance, he has the title of assistant treasurer or deputy or whatever, and you talk to 5 different treasurers and they all have the same title, and they'll say, oh, you do the same job in the same way, and they obviously don't. It's fascinating how the diversity and breadth of it is mad. It's absolutely great. Absolutely.
Well, thanks very much for that, Mike. You mentioned technology there briefly, so I'd like to move on to that now. A lot of people are worried. They're fearing that their roles might become redundant and the machines will take over. But there's also a different view that it's just about a different way of working. I know, Tram, you've got some views on this, so maybe I could turn to you for your views, please.
Yes, no, thanks, Caroline. I think for us at CFT, we had that view that, I mean, the world of finance has changed already. I mean, the tipping point, as we, my co-founder, keeps saying, it has already passed. I mean, the COVID-19 is just accelerating. A lot of people, and we're convinced already that some of the jobs in finance will totally transform. Some are already disappearing. Some are being actually created, new jobs that didn't even exist a few years ago, now are totally reshaping the world of finance. And I think the COVID-19 is just accelerating things. And when people think we had 6 years to plan for reskilling, in fact, I think we only have 6 months to adapt. My view is I'm quite for that quite strong on this. I think, and I just actually attended a conference by Coursera just before this, and they had exactly the same view as us. The finance industry is ill, not prepared. If you look at our industry finance, we see a huge difference in terms of skills and knowledge of business and tech and data science. Finance industry does not come first, and very low in the ranking in terms of having the right skills and knowledge. It's quite alarming. I'm happy to share more, but my view is that, and we've been talking about this just, that's why at CFT we were the first in the industry to, because we understand the industry very well, we launched the first program because we knew that we see the industry changing, who is transforming at a very fast pace with digital and new technologies, APIs, data, AI, machine learning. And for those in FX, in Treasury, for example, it's transforming very quickly. We work with the banks, and some of the people are not prepared at all. So I think it's about having the relevant knowledge. Try to learn things that are not relevant to your job. We've done, I know I've been in banking. I'm learning things, and I used to be, I'm not going to mention that, I used to be learning things that has been, we've learned 10, 20 years ago. Nothing has changed. And in fact, the industry is changing. And there's this, mismatch that people don't get and don't see. We keep talking about new knowledge, understanding the industry, the ecosystem you are in. So to come back to your question, Caroline, some people talk about role being made redundant, and people are scared about it. Just to give you an example, and I like example because it speaks very well. We met 2 years ago, the head of a compliance of a group, UOB, one of the banks in Singapore, led by Victor Mo. He's happy for me to share his case study. But 2 years ago, we started to work with him, and he decided to train all his employees. He's leading the compliance group. There were hundreds of compliance officers, quite technical in digital finance and in artificial intelligence in finance. Most of them are people like me. So people who don't know their business very, very well, but they are not geeks at all. They were trained to understand the basic concepts of technology, but more importantly, the use case of finance. A year later, they are perhaps one of the most innovative compliance groups in the world. They have developed an internal team called AAA, Automation, Analytics, and AI. And this team works together with the compliance officer to find better ways today to do IAM, KYC, so for example, trying to use machine learning to detect suspicious transactions. And what is interesting is that all these initiatives started from the compliance team and not the technology. So I give you this example is saying that, please, we are not building a bank to get data scientists and technology to run the banks today or the treasury team. What I want to say is that it can be people that are very traditional that must start their journey understanding what's happening out there and learning the concept, have to be apply it, and then after that try to transform themselves. And my view is that it's the time to change and to get before adapting to get the right knowledge so that you understand what you don't know. When you understand what you don't know, you feel much better and you can adapt faster.
Indeed. I would think though maybe not all hope is lost either. If I think back to when I started out training at KPMG in 1990, computers had only really just started, and if you think of the evolution, it's been a much slower evolution than what we're seeing now. But of technology, we've got used to using smartphones, using laptops, using different pieces of technology. And the good thing is those people who are developing the technology, even if it's come, initially from compliance, as you say, whatever, the people developing the tools are making them very user-friendly.
Exactly.
So it's much easier when you see 3-year-olds using iPads and so on. It's much easier. So I think that there isn't all hope lost. But with that, I'll turn to Jayesh to maybe give us a perspective from a treasurer.
I think Tram was quite right. The technology is an enabler, and let's be clear that it's not the be-all and end-all.
Exactly.
It's important for the human to understand what the technology, what the outputs are telling us. As the age-old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed a machine with garbage, guess what? You're going to come out with garbage. So we need to ensure that we equip the people reading the data to understand what's going on. So therefore, data scientists, machines, etc., well, they're fantastic at their work, at their job. They need to apply it to the core finance and treasury principles. And that's where I think roles won't be redundant, because those people that may find this period quite scary because technology is perhaps taking over roles, actually not. Technology is improving the way work has been done, but you're still needed to ensure that your perspective, your experience, the things that you've seen in the past, are you can add value and contribute to the company.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Jayesh. Mike, from a slightly different perspective, what are you seeing?
Well, actually, it's very similar to Jayesh's perspective there. The role of the treasurer is increasingly technological, and you've got to have that acumen and everything else. But the role of the treasurer has always been technical. It's technical, treasury-wise, finance, and now it's the interface with technology and using that and as a tool. And a tool can be a dangerous weapon, as we know, and everything else. But one of the key things is that I'm never asked. I don't get asked by a CFO picks up the phone and says, "Mike, I want a treasurer that is an IT guru that does this, and a programmer as well as a treasurer." They want a treasurer first, and how do they then bring that IT capacity or integrate any IT team? Well, they'll bring in a systems guy. Those are the key things. It's not someone who says, there must be, as Tram put, a programmer in Python. It's not that. Yeah, an understanding of blockchain. And again, sometimes on the podcast, I ask people that, with treasurers, do they find that the CFO is pushing the treasurer in front of them, not under the bus, luckily. But a lot of the time is like the leader, if you like, to be the filter for a lot of that IT technology coming at them. Oh, we've got this blockchain idea. What do you think? And they're the filter a lot of the time. And I think that's another thing being thrown at treasurers in an increasingly technological world. And then you do get also the other one, I was going to mention actually, because it just came up in the conversation there. One great treasurer I know, Séverine Leblanc from Honeywell, she got so much and is so much into IT. She's just a crazy, mad, wonderful lady. But and I've said this to her, she now knows how to machine code. So she knows how to move the robots. So she can do this. And I said, why did you learn this as a treasurer? She went, well, if I'm going to tell these guys how we make it work to then impact on my balance sheet and why they can't spell, I want to learn this. And she's actually done this and can hop on a desk and do this. And I think, there may be more technologically savvy treasurers in the future, but I think they use it more as a part of their toolkit rather than their overall toolkit sort of thing.
Absolutely. Well, that's I think very pertinent to Tramann's research and so on. You've seen this kind of. I think you've got an example that you could maybe give us, if you can think of one, of how these different kinds of skills are coming in and this diversity, if you like, of talent within the treasury or finance team or whatever it happens to be.
Yes. No. Let me take a step back, because I agree, with Mike and Josh saying that does anyone has to be learning the same way and exactly in the same format. And I think it really depends on where you are. if you are a CEO of a bank or you're a manager or an employee, it really depends on what you want to achieve and what's your goal in terms of skills as well. But I just wanted to step back. And I think for us at CFT, we talked about, the how. And I think, if I may, I'll step back a little bit and let me share with you the 4 stages that are important in transforming the people. And for us, it's first, awareness. And at the moment, what I feel and what we feel is that 90% of professionals are in that stage where they know that something is happening, but they are not totally sure of what. And the what I call, they don't know what they don't know. We know that we don't want people to stay at this stage, because it's usually a stage of anxiety and resistance. They are afraid of, for example, that they will be replaced by a robot. We don't want that. We want to know what's happening. So very quickly, we want to move people from the awareness to the knowledge level. They want to understand, for example, what is AI, the main concept, the vocabulary, how it's been applied in finance, and how we can solve it. But of course, in a bank, we just don't want people with good knowledge. We want them to get also the right skills so that they can apply it in their job. And I think for us, of course, hard skills, we all agree in this, otherwise we won't be here, but we understand hard skills is important. But more importantly today is the soft skills. We know that is the soft skills such as collaboration, adaptability, which is often overlooked, which now play a much more significant role in this new world. I call this AI world, because for me, AI is a powerful technology that is very much transforming the way that we do finance, and having also this right mindset. Why am I saying that? Is because when I started banking 20 years ago, and I was on a trading floor, probably it's just my example, but it speaks. We don't have much to build or to reinvent. Today, this new world of finance is totally transforming. COVID is a demonstration, is accelerating. And what traditional finance probably don't have or get, and we see it because we spoke with our thousands of alumni around the world, and they keep asking and checking us, how do I build up this mindset of being an entrepreneur? How do I actually help my bank to be entrepreneur? How do I start from a project where I have no clue of how to start with this new world that is reinventing, and my role in a bank is very siloed. I want to be much more collaborative. And how do I build this mindset? And this is what it comes, and it keeps coming up to us. So it's, I think, having these hard skills, of course, these soft skills, and the right mindset.
Absolutely, and our Business of Treasury Research 2020 shows that the thing that people are saying is the biggest blocker to their career development is the lack of those skills, the kind of strategic influencing, the communication, relationship building, which is why we put such an emphasis, obviously, in our higher level qualifications and also in the other trainings we do that are on that softer set rather than the technical side. But with that, maybe I can turn to Jayesh from a Treasury perspective, that diversity of different skills. What are your thoughts?
Look, I think it's important to appreciate that the Treasury team is quite a unique team. Now, if you take a step back and really analyze what you've done at the moment or what you've done in the past, we're fortunate to see in the entire supply chain, right from purchasing raw material to seeing revenues coming in from the end customer when we sell a product. We manage cash, short, medium-term cash flow. We provide insight into company strategy. We've now got a seat at the board table where we influence CEOs and the chairman on where we see treasury risk. We raise finance, whether it be capital markets, debt capital markets, or equity capital markets. So you can see that we manage risk, and you can see that our remit is very broad, and it's very important to hone in on your soft skills. Collaboration, this is all great, but really just be a good person. How do you actually speak to junior people? How do you communicate to senior people? That's very important. The social side is extremely important. While machines will be great at number crunching and giving you outputs in super quick time, in nanoseconds as opposed to a second, the strategic aspects of treasury will always have to be done by a human. You can only communicate, machines can't communicate with the CEO or chairman. Treasurers have a unique insight about the company, about the industry, about geopolitics, about what's going on in the local area. It really is difficult to program a machine with this information. So I think, although machines will be great at spinning numbers around quickly, we really need to have that communication line and really understand what they're telling us.
Absolutely, and I think you referenced that machines are great at providing all that data, and we had another session that was on cash flow forecasting, and of course a lot of that is behavioural too, but the system can help you to get stuff real in time immediately and can manage huge bits of data. So it comes back to, again, how does the human use that rather than perhaps the machines taking over. But it also interests me, and before COVID-19, but it's been accelerated, if you like, through all age groups. But I was always puzzling, having a teenage son and a daughter who's now 21, and looking at how they operate, particularly my son, how he's always on the computer, and how neuroscientists say that the brain's changing and so on. And you think some of the things that I do as a trained coach when I'm coaching people, I'm teaching people about things, behaviors that we've had for centuries. And I've always been wondering, though, is it changing? Because if people are communicating through their phones and short text all the time, have we, is it going to be different? So I noticed through the lockdown, my son in particular suffered, even though I thought he'd be so happy just gaming all the time, because of the lack of social interaction. And just wondering, your thoughts, Jayesh, on that point. Do you think some of the premises we've had about behaviour and interaction and influencing will stay the same in this rather more virtual world?
You're completely right. It's the irony is, because of technology, we've been able to speak to someone from any part of the world, yet we've become so distanced when someone's sitting next to us. Families, friends, households, student apartments, they're common with people. You may have 5 people sitting in one room, but they're all talking to different people on their phone. And this is quite a sad reality of what the world is. Now, I strongly believe we need to bring back the roots and bring back the social interaction, because ultimately, no matter how great a phone is, or you can type or speak to someone else, there's a beauty in speaking to a person. You seeing the world, seeing the colors, seeing expression is a beautiful thing, and we need to champion this and really encourage this. And this is where when people say people want to work from home, yes, great, but Treasury teams are social, workplaces are for social, to be a social environment. You work better when you're speaking to someone, and I think there will be a change in remote working, but ultimately you'll need to have some sort of social experience, interaction to really go that extra mile.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks, Jayesh. And another element of diversity I'd like to move on to next, if we may. But do feel free to jump in and come back to any other points if I've missed anyone. But the diversity. So we know that in Treasury, say in the UK, there's about 30% are female. Which it's not 50%, but it's improving slowly. In terms of ethnicity, we know we can't get hold of all the stats, but we do know, because it's visual, a lot of it, you can see that there isn't as much difference, or we're not representing our society in the way that we maybe should do. And there's one of the things that we're actively doing at the moment, the ACT, is looking for a partner to be able to support us while we offer our qualifications and assessments to people from the BAME community, or not community, but BAME background, for free. So to encourage that awareness of Treasury, where a lot of people in general out there don't know what Treasury is, but to try and proactively bring that balance back. And we're going to offer our qualifications for free, but we need a partner for the assessment because we have to pay a third party, and we're a not-for-profit. So we really want to do that. But I'd just like to ask the panelists, though, do you think the current crisis is bringing real focus, of course, on liquidity and cash management, and the Treasurer is front and centre to all that, as you've already said? Do you think this increased awareness of the Treasurer role could be something that could help us increase our levels of diversity within the Treasury community? Maybe, as you've not spoken for a while, Mike, maybe I can go to you first.
Yeah, I think it definitely. Well, we talked a lot, and we talked on the rehearsal call before. We talked about homeschooling and the pressures on the social world, if you like, of how treasurers are meant to act and the support they're given. But I think it actually goes way before pre-COVID. I wrote some articles, about how I've got 2 daughters, 2 sons, and but the way that when they move forward into the world, that the way that say there's a chap coming back from illness or something like that, or a lady coming back from maternity leave, the actual help that is provided, the support and the way that people are treated, I found is very different and can be very different a lot of the time. And again, I know that Caroline, we spoke before about Linda at Tesco's, who I've spoken about and we've interviewed. She was on the podcast. She was given such amazing support when she came back, when she was throughout her career at Kingfisher, and then she came into Tesco's. And I think that makes a hell of a difference. I think it comes down to companies taking that more holistic view of, all those different things, ethnicity, diversity, male, female, everything, and actually stepping back from that and looking at people as individuals. And, I get asked sometimes, there are some publications that ask, about the sort of the women in Treasury and various other bits and things. And I sometimes say, look, I can't really comment on that, because what I'm focusing on, the people as individuals, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether they're male, female. But I think what we're after is a fair chance for everyone, and I think that's the issue with companies, that they need to focus on that first and foremost. I mean, I don't know who the other panelists, Tram is sort of nodding a lot. That's what you've seen as well.
I think we need to first address that there is a problem. Let's not hide behind a wall and say there isn't a problem. But to know the quantum of the problem, the scale of the problem, we really need to collect statistics. We need to ensure corporates, professional bodies are collecting data about gender, ethnicity, characteristics that are protected characteristics. So it's really important to understand that first. The typical route for someone coming to Treasury and I'm joining the podcast and sort of the previous sessions and seeing the biographies. Almost 95% people had some sort of experience in finance, and a significant number of them are accountants. Now, if you look at the accounting papers and sort of articles, you can see there's a significant number of BAME accountants. So how are these people not falling into Treasury? So there's something we need to address there. And Caroline mentioned earlier, there's 95 nationalities on this who've signed up, and 2,500 people who've signed up to this Treasury Festival Week. So how is it that we've got a diverse background in Treasury, clearly, because there's all these people signed up? How are they not getting the senior posts? Now, the BAME people that are in the sector need to see a clear path of progression. So they need to see like-minded people go for those treasurer roles, go for those CFO roles, go for those CEO roles. Only then they can have confidence and say, okay, I'm going to put my hat in for this role. There's a company called Treasury Recruitment who've done a lot of studies in the law sector, and they've seen that BAME lawyers spend on average 20% less time in a post compared to their white counterparts. So there's clearly work being done to understand why things are happening. And as a Treasury body, we need to really address this face on and trying to build solutions and really move on with this, because diversity is a beautiful thing. It really is. And having diverse people has proven to improve teams. But we just need to do a little bit more to encourage diversity in each and every organization. And as organizations ourselves, we need to ensure that we are collecting the right statistics and ensuring that there isn't any bias in the recruitment process.
Absolutely. And I mean, all the research does show, starting way back with IMD, did research decades ago about diverse teams being able to outperform other teams. But one of the issues we try to get our members to fill out their data, including their sort of ethnicity, and they don't do it. So it's really difficult then as a membership organisation to force people to tell you their backgrounds. And if we can get that, I would encourage people to give us that. But it's also, when you said we've got a massively international audience, so we have a natural diversity globally. It's when you look at specific countries that you see that you're not always reflecting the population. I think you're absolutely right about those points about inclusion and about role models. But there's been a lot of discussion now, about the microaggressions, about the unconscious things that people do. For instance, a lot of HR departments, when you're recruiting, they'll recommend that you check somebody's previous salary and then you give them a bit of an uplift. Whereas my belief is you should go with the salary that you're offering for the job. If you think somebody can do that job, you offer them the job at that salary. Because otherwise what you do is you proliferate the lower salary that they might have already been getting from another employer. And you've got the gender pay gap, or the racial pay gap, just kind of gets larger and larger. So there are lots of really great points that you raise there, Jayesh. And it is up to us, to try to really think about, and the final point I'll make before we move on to Tram is and just to say the other thing is that I think, others as a kind of majority race in this country need to think about is how other people, and I've been told this by my members of staff, my friends and so on, because we've been talking very openly recently with Black Lives Matters, coming to the fore. We need to understand people are actually changing their behaviors to try and fit in with another kind of style and culture often. And they're almost living in two worlds and having to they're flexing, and actually we should be appreciating each other's difference a lot more. But with that, I'll move on to Tram. I'm a little bit passionate about this subject. So Tram, please.
You know how I'm passionate about this subject as well. So I'm glad that Mike and Rajesh started, but I'm not going to take too long. I can, I think it's a as Jayesh was saying, it's a huge problem. I mean, we can't, it's a reality. And the way that we do it is that as founder, as recruiter, we need to change. We need to change. We need to say it. So the way that I hire my team now, I don't look at the CV. I look at the skills. I don't look at where they come from. I don't even know which university they come from. I just look at what do you have? What kind of skills do you get? Do you have this ability to actually have the right mindset to work? And I will provide all the education. I will skill you up. I just want to make sure that you have the great luggage, and it's all come from me, from the skills and the mindset. For me, I'm very happy to say that 40% of my staff are female, and I'm trying to change the way that we're hiring as well. But I have to say, this industry has not changed. When I started 20 years ago on the Treasury, I was the first woman trader in Wall Street, the only one. And today, if I look at the trading floor, I must admit it's probably the same, which is not normal. And so why the industry is not changing? Of course, there's lots of ways why it's not changing. Lack of role model, as you said. But for me, it's a lack of policies, lack of support from the government. When you have your first child, when you have your second child, when you have your third child, and you want to still, progress in your career, but you penalize. Having your first child, you penalize by at least 20% on your salary. If you come back, you already put like you step back from another year, and then when you have third child, you go back to 10 years. The organization and the government is not supporting women enough in my. But I think I have to say, I hope that having this new way of working will help. Is it helping? I was asking, and I was sharing with one leader. She's running a large team, 500 people for a bank, and she's saying that I thought that by working at home, it will be easier for me to run my team, and actually, it's horrible because she has her kids, she doesn't have the setup, and I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge. How do you, try to get, a woman to actually work and thrive in this new world? And I think it has to come from the top. It has to come from the government. It has to come from your leader, and it has to be the responsible. It doesn't have to be hidden and put, at the back. And that needs a lot of changes. For us at CFTE, we have a large community that is extremely well represented. Out of the norm, I must say, we try to encourage a lot of women to learn. You know how much percentage? I have 70,000 alumni around the world learning about fintech, learning about AI in finance, learning about RegTech, open banking. I have 45% women learning. They are working and they are learning very fast about things because they want to be part of the future of finance. They learn, but how do you encourage them to actually apply and get a job or do something that can make them to grow even more? So we are doing more. How do you apply it to your job? So we are doing a lot of initiatives, making sure that they network. They have like a good network. That's why we launched a series of inspiring women leaders to get, and Caroline, you were very kind, to come and share a lecture to the community of women. And it was very inspiring, but it helps a lot to get women, to get confidence, to get a good network of people. So I would encourage, all of the women who is, looking for opportunities today. The industry of finance is a growing one, looking for talent. For those who has the right knowledge, the right skills, and the mindset, and women, you can thrive. And I'm not going to share more, but I have amazing transformation of women who has been into traditional job, now leading amazing job, who are now global head of innovation at Prudential in Singapore. And she managed to transform. And I have lots and lots of examples, but we need to be together in this. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's very challenging.
It's not easy. Thanks, Tram. And it isn't. And we see through COVID-19 and the virtual world we're living in, we are seeing women sometimes dropping out of it, and for some of the reasons that you mentioned, and also some ethnic minorities. If the audience is interested, the ACT, our staff, we're about 75% women. So we need some more men, but we're very, very mixed racially, sort of in terms of ethnicity. So we're pleased about that. I have some audience questions though now before we go on any further. A couple of really good ones here, and one of them says, will we see more global workforce if we have more virtual teams? Maybe I could turn to Mike on that one. And what's your thinking?
I think there will be, yeah, definitely. I think working from home, but working remotely, it's got to, it can go across borders. People talk to me about, well, does the global recruitment pipeline exist? It doesn't. I can't move to the US. None of you guys, unless you marry an American or an American comes here and marries you, you can't move. We can't move across the Atlantic. They can't come here. We can't move in certain places, Europe and across to Asia and right the way across. It's very difficult unless you're sponsored by a company. And so I often say to people, you are limited to certain points. I think things might change, and we're already starting to see some things change. We're talking about Brexit, we're talking about things like that. But I think, yes, going back to it, yeah, there is going to be much more international, global working. How applicable is that to day-to-day Treasury? I'm not sure, Jayesh, if you like, if he's got a project on, is he going to turn to someone in the US or Asia to help as a resource? I think, we come back to, COVID and being closer to your teams. I think it's a way off still, I think, but yeah, it's a good question.
Time zones can be a challenge. We were talking to some of the largest treasurers in the US, and they were saying they've transformed their thinking. I know I've pushed in the past, to really create virtual teams because of the benefits of diversity, but some people just weren't ready for it. And maybe this shift is making that happen. Do we have, before we move on to the next question, any quick comments from Jayesh or Tram on that?
My view is that it's going to be very global. My view is that it's just accelerating. The seed that I see, I was talking to a bank in the UK. Now they're saying they're partnering with people from all around the world, and it's just accelerating. So I think it's going to be a global workforce. People won't move, but now with what is, the setup, the new setup is easier, much easier to have teams all around the world. And to be honest with you, as I mentioned earlier on, we at CFT, we don't even know where our staff are. They're everywhere around the world. I don't hire people now based on where they are. They could be, in India or in Asia or US, but it's very changing the way that we are building up teams now. It's all about the skills and the mindset.
And Jayesh, Treasurer's point of view.
No, definitely there'll be a global workforce, and I think more importantly, Treasury, a lot of it is to do with local expertise and local know-how. So we do need to ensure that even though you have a global workforce, that local regulation, local laws. People do know that.
Of course.
Absolutely. And we have one other question, a really excellent question here. We've heard about the how everyone has different learning styles. Is this a generational issue? And if so, how does this affect recruitment and education? Do I have a volunteer to take this first of all?
I think I'll take this one. I think the question's really right. People are learning in different ways. As I said before, kinesthetic learning is known to be quite successful. Practical ways of learning, a bit more hands-on. I think textbooks have been literally thrown out the window. So experiences and sharing and practical learning is probably the way forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that ties in with what the neuroscientists are saying about the brain's development. Tram.
Yeah, same for us. I mean, we are in online education. So we've seen, an acceleration of people wanting to learn more online, learn at their own pace, bite size, and learning so that they can apply very quickly to their job. Not something too theoretical, but something where they can actually see the value for them to apply very quickly to their own function, having the right knowledge, the right skills. And then after that, we are seeing this definitely. It's not the old way of learning. It's very micro, bite-sized, online. And then after that, join a community where they can peer-to-peer learning and share together, and people not necessarily from the same background. So people quite senior, from chairman of a bank, learning with an analyst and sharing together. This is more what we see. Before, it was the same promotion or it was the same age group. Now with what we're seeing is that people, and this is what we are doing with the entrepreneurship program that we've launched, is that we are actually at the request of certain learner. They want to be in a group with certain age groups so that they can also have this type of learning with mentorship with someone more senior, but also people from diverse culture and background so that they know what's happening in certain countries in terms of regulation and what's happening in finance. So yes, totally different way of learning today.
Thanks. And Mike?
I think it's also about, whilst recognising that, I think there's a pressure on treasuries, as we've just talked about throughout today's session. There's loads of stuff happening, and how much pressure there's on a treasury team now and how much support there is for training and the balance between both. Because there's a CFO knocking on the door of the treasurer and saying, deliver me results with your remote team. Oh, but actually a load of my team wants some training as well, and they want to come to the ACT and things like that. I think it's how treasurers deal with that pressure that they're getting, that's coming at them, because it's a tough world out there. And these guys, you guys and everyone watching today has got to deliver results, and it's sort of trying to, deflect that a little bit in some ways and make sure that then they support their teams. So again, pressure from below them and from the side and from the top. So yeah, it's they need some de-stressing really.
And we'll come back to that in a moment before we close. But just on the sort of the learning styles and so on, and it is very much that shorter, sharp, practical and so on. But when we think about practical, often that is learning on the job. And one thing that one of our group treasurers raised was, how if machines are taking over lots of the different roles, how are people going to learn the intricacies of the profession? And I suppose it's part of education, but I'll leave people to mull over that themselves, because we had a last minute question just come in, and I'm not sure how really we can all answer this in 2 minutes. And the question is, a lot of Treasury staff will have been furloughed. What support will they need when returning to work, and are they likely to get it? So yes, quite a number have been furloughed because we know, because we've offered a discounted rate to our members. And that's in the UK, just so that people elsewhere are aware. It's a governmental scheme, the Job Retention Scheme, which allows people to be paid 80% of their salary, but they're not working. And it's to kind of encourage employment in the UK. And so this question is, what support will they need when returning to work, and are they likely to get it? Well, again, the numbers aren't huge in Treasury, because Treasury is pretty vital, but we are seeing people being furloughed and some being made redundant. Returning to work support, some of that will be down to the organisation itself, of course, but I would suggest we have a mass of resources on our website and through our different fora, through different events, through our qualifications, public training, etc. So, if you are one of those people and you're finding returning to work is going to be a challenge for you, please do get in touch with the ACT. We're here to help treasurers, our members, and any treasurer anywhere, because that's what our vision and mission is about. So as I say, I'm not doing the panelists because I think it's a difficult one for people to answer individually, and we've only got 30 seconds left. So thank you for that question though. But if anyone is in doubt, needs support, do get in touch with us. We are here to help. So without further ado, I'd like to thank my panelists, Jayesh, Mike and Tram. It's been a pleasure having you here today. Really great to give up your time, and I hope and I'm sure the audience will have got a lot out of your insights. So thank you very much. If I can just remind everyone to have a look around the site, you will be able to listen to other sessions. You can listen to everything up till the 13th of August. And do join us tomorrow for our final day. We've got a great lineup tomorrow as well. So I do hope to see you virtually then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.